Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week, economy, finances. It turns out we did not get the beginning of World War III, so that has settled down quite a bit, but now we have a new crisis with raw materials. We had cacao, which is chocolate, which is exploding, and now we have the world's favorite beverage, coffee and tea, now are starting to explode in price. Let's go ahead and get started. Markets this week are mostly being affected by the tension in the Middle East. Obviously, we had that situation last week where everybody thought World War III was going to break out. Very uncharacteristically, Iran attacked directly Israel with drones and missiles. Then Israel went ahead and attacked Iran. A lot of people on X or Twitter are saying, for example, that they didn't really do an official attack. They're just, kind of doing it per performance or appearances. But either way, it seemed like things were escalating, but now it looks like the attacks are over and World War III isn't going to begin. The stocks for the week, the Dow was the only one that was positive. It's had 7 negative sessions of the last 8. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ were both negative, while the Republic, the Communist Republic of Canada went down by 0.31%. Conspiracy and weather news. I told you guys, I believe it was December 2023, last December, that for some reason I kind of thought something was going to happen with California, in regards to not a terrorist attack, but an earthquake. Because if you saw, for example, January 1st of this year, we had that huge earthquake in Japan, which I mentioned to you, I kind of felt like it was a bad omen. But you can kind of see the earthquakes coming around. I think it was the Philippines got hit with one, New Zealand got hit with one, now it's in Chile. And if you guys don't know how it works, essentially the Atlantic, if I'm not mistaken, is expanding while the Pacific is the opposite of expanding. Comprimir in Spanish, in case you were interested in how to say that in Spanish. I always do the videos in Spanish first and I keep thinking in Spanish. But the Pacific is essentially closing. It's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. And the Atlantic is expanding. That's why there's so many, for example, volcanoes along the Pacific Rim, meaning that kind of circle of land, for example, Alaska down to California, down to the Central America, South America. There's all these volcanoes along that rim, even Indonesia, for example, right? Japan, all that rim is kind of called the Ring of Fire due to the situation with the tectonic activity. And essentially a volcano is when the tectonic plates move and lava actually comes through, right? So another thing that's really interesting also that I'll just throw in there is that the amount of carbon that's spewed by just one volcanic eruption literally is 100 times what humans do in a year. Just throwing that out there for, those climate people. So speaking about California, kind of turning back on that, it's really interesting that a lot of insurance companies now have been pulling out of California. Big companies already like Allstate, Farmers Insurance, Hartford, but now this week there's another 2 insurance companies that are pulling out of California. Now, this could be because of the bureaucracy. Obviously, it's now the most left-leaning state in the Union, in the United States. I very aptly call it the Communist Republic of California. So they could be leaving just because of the bureaucracy and the taxes they have to pay and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that's interesting as well is Florida is having the same situation with insurance companies wanting not to insure a lot of the homes in Florida. So Florida, for example, has the situations with the hurricanes, which this year might be a big year, a problem due to the fact that the oceans in the Atlantic are actually warmer than they even were last year, which is actually interesting. So let's keep an eye on it because I think it's still in, 2 or 3 years or so, we're going to have a really big earthquake there, and unfortunately that might cause a lot of havoc. Another thing that was really interesting this week is 96 food plants so far since the Biden administration started have been destroyed by quote-unquote fire, explosions, or unexplained closures. So if you guys know what happened to Russia during the Stalin situation, or even, for example, in China, Tiananmen Square a few years ago, the first thing they always go after before they go after you is the food, because if they can control the food, they can obviously control you. Overseas market news. Oh, wait, where's my button? Hold on, wait for it. Overseas market news. The European markets were mostly mixed. Latin America was mostly lower. The biggest market in Latin America, the Bovespa in Brazil, was down 0.65%. Middle East and Africa mostly lower as well. And the far East, Asia, Australia, that whole area lower as well. Obviously, the situation with the Middle East, the wars that are breaking out caused a lot of havoc with the stocks. Bitcoin and crypto, huge sell-off on Saturday after Iran attacked Israel. Steepest sell-off for Bitcoin in over a year. Ethereum also saw heavy selling in regards to other cryptos as well. Ethereum saw at one point or a few times down to 10% in some instances. And for the week, Bitcoin was down 5.87% at 63,827. Commodities, the U.S. index, the dollar index, which kind of takes all the currencies combined against the dollar, hit an actual high. The highest, not a record high, but the highest level since November. So one of the things that we have to know about a lot of the commodities or the raw materials that we use, most are priced in dollars, right? So if the dollar is going to go up quite a bit, then that puts a lot of pressure, selling pressure on the value of these, and vice versa. If we have a weaker dollar, then that means commodities are probably going to go up. So crude went down over 3% to 83.14, while Brent went down 3.62% to 87.29. So we kind of have buying pressure with the uncertainty about the situation with the war and the attacks in the Middle East, but that was superseded by the situation with the dollar. Global tea and coffee prices are up by 50% since last year. Extreme weather has affected places like Vietnam. So if you didn't know, Brazil is actually the largest producer of coffee in the world, called Arabica. Well, you guys know. There's another one from Vietnam called Robusta. So the tea has gone up 34% since the last month. Coffee has gone up 20% since January. So now you better stock up on coffee. In addition, you better stock up on chocolate, because chocolate, also cacao prices, which is the fruit that chocolate comes from, actually went up another 9% for the first time ever, record high of 11,000 per metric ton. They're up 18% in 2 days. It actually went up to 12,000 a ton. Prices are up more than 190%. And remember, the reason why is because those three countries in Western Africa have been having a lot of situations with crazy weather, in addition to a lot of critters going after the plants, plagues and things. And so that's the reason why cacao is continuing to go up as well. I'm going to plant some cacao because, oh my, chocolate. Precious metals are higher for the week. Gold is up over 2% to $23.92 20 cents, 2,392. It hit a record high of over 2,400. Silver up to 2.89% to 28.75. The global silver deficit is due to rise in 2024 on higher demand and lower supply. So if you guys don't know how it works, essentially we need a lot more silver than what they're mining at the second, basically, right? So the reason why is because solar panels and renewable cars, like electric vehicles, they use the silver in these markets due to the fact that silver is the highest conductive metal that we have, meaning that when the electric passes through the metal, you lose the less amount because of the friction and other things. And so they use that specifically with the solar panels and the electric cars to be able to have less loss in electricity, because obviously every little bit counts. And so there's a situation now where the deficit is going to grow, right? There's going to be a bigger gap between the amount that's being used compared to the amount that's being produced. And on top of that, you have other players, for example, like the Central Bank of India, that bought 130 million ounces of silver. Now, to put that into perspective, if they buy the same amount of silver over the next 3 quarters annually, they're going to buy 60% of all the annual production of silver. So in the first semester, they actually bought 15% of all global production. So the demand continues to go up, the production continues to go down, and while it is being manipulated quite a bit, eventually it's got to break out. Financial and banking news, as I mentioned, the U.S. index, it didn't hit a record high, but it hit a high since November, while the yen weakened to its lowest level in June 1990. I'm going to tell you guys, the food in Japan is out of this world. So now that the sushi is starting to get a lot cheaper, highly recommend you go to Japan. Highly recommend. Chinese new home prices have fallen for the 9th straight month. They're down 2.2% year over year in March. They had the sharpest fall in home pricing since August 2015. One of the things I want to kind of paint in regards to the economy, the majority of industrialized economies, you know, us in the West and places like Europe and Canada and Australia, the majority of their economy is consumer spending. The United States is almost 70% consumer spending. Germany, for example, is about 50%. But China's a little bit different. They don't have as a mature consumer market as we have because obviously they're just starting to industrialize. So their biggest market and what moves the economy, especially since a lot of people have their pensions and things, is the home prices. So the second largest economy in the world, their biggest percentage of the economy is starting to hiccup. That can carry over into the rest of the world economy as well. In political news, India's national election, about 970 million registered voters are now voting for the unprecedented third term of Prime Minister Modi's re-election campaign. Third world country, India, almost 1 billion people, registered voters. You got to show ID to vote. But ironically, in the United States, they don't want to allow ID for voting. But hey, if you want to get the pandemic, right? You got to get your card to know what shots you took, but that's not racist. And, you know, to drive and get drinks, you got to have that card. That's not racist either. But when it comes to voting, super racist. Economic news, U.S. March retail sales not adjusted for inflation, 0.7 instead of the estimated 0.3. If you take out auto sales, they went up by 1.1%. This is retail sales, so the sales at stores, right? Consumer spending. The expected was 0.5. So the number that came in was 1.1. The expected number was 0.5, excluding auto sales. That means that we got double, right, what the expectation was, which means that according to the numbers that the central bank looks at, less likely to lower interest rates this year due to what's happening, the numbers that they're looking at. Now, remember, the consumer spending in the United States, as I mentioned to you guys a moment ago, the most important number of all in the economy. It's almost 70% of the economy. So when we have a situation now where the interest rates are a lot higher, it's a lot harder for consumers to go out and spend, right? To buy houses and cars and all those things, especially since now the economy is over-financialized since the economic crisis of 2008 and 2009. Economic growth in China was higher than expected at 5.3%. The government of China, if you believe the numbers that they put out, their target of growth is going to be 5%, but the real economic engine is going to be India, especially since a lot of countries around the world are moving their manufacturing from China to India. In corporate news, Tesla was going to lay off 10% of the global workforce. They have almost 141,000 employees worldwide. The sales continue to go down. They just lowered their price of their Model 3 in China by a few $1,000s. The Xiaomi, which is another electric car company that came from a cell phone. They were originally a cell phone company. They came out with an electric car as well that's cheaper than Tesla. So it looks like they have a lot of pressure on their hands. And also 2 executives from the Tesla board, not the board, but the executives are looking to resign as well. So it looks like Tesla might be in a little bit of trouble. And remember that there was news that they were going to cancel their cheaper car, which is going to be dubbed the Model 2, even though Elon Musk said on X, Twitter, that they're still going to be producing it. So their stock is down so far 35% in 2024. Everybody always counts Tesla out until they come roaring back. Apple lost its title as the top phone maker to my favorite and best phone of all, Samsung. Their shipments fell by 9.6% annually. Samsung has a market share now of 20.8%. Apple's number 2 at 17.3%. And the Chinese phone maker Xiaomi is at 14.1%, whose sales went up 34%. Xiaomi. Netflix is down over 9% after they said that they're going to stop reporting subscriber growth and the quarterly earnings starting 2025. The question is why? Maybe they're not having or not expecting as much growth as before. And Nvidia fell 10% on Friday, the worst day for the chip maker since March 2020. No bad news, but investors essentially sold off a lot of the semiconductor stocks, which obviously includes Nvidia. Technology, Elon Musk confirms that X is going to start charging all users a small fee to post, like, bookmark, or reply. And 911 call services mysteriously went down in 4 states at the same time. Ironically, this is before DHS, which is the Department of Homeland Security, advised that they're worried about cyber attacks on emergency services. And China is beginning to build an underwater data center with a performance equal to 6 million PCs. I thought this was incredible. So they're basically going to take those servers that connect this on the internet and put them in the bottom of the ocean and save on electricity. They're also going to save nearly 10 soccer fields. I know you guys in the United States don't know what soccer field looks like, but it's kind of like a football field. And one computer that they're going to put down there is going to process as much information as 60,000 regular computers, especially because it's a lot easier to cool at the bottom of the ocean. And Meta Platforms, the owner of Facebook, is saying that they're going to release their latest large language model called Llama 3 to try to catch up to ChatGPT and OpenAI. And international events, we talked about the attacks between Israel and Iran, which have calmed down for now. And the UAE continues to reel from floods. They had the whole year, they generally get about 4 inches of rain, and they got 5.5 inches of rain in just 24 hours. They do quite a bit of cloud seeding, however, which means that, they put stuff in the atmosphere to be able to cause rain to come down. But I don't know if you guys have seen, there seems to be an increase in these kind of situations, the forest fires, the floods, the sequías, the droughts. So we'll see what happens. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers were right.